The first time that I went to El Salvador on a human rights pilgrimage, my friend Mike found me out in the garden in tears about 3 days in. I was crying not because of what we were seeing and hearing exactly, although certainly what we were seeing and hearing was a lot of heartrending things. I was crying mostly because I couldn't figure out what I was doing there. What good was I doing? I wasn't a lawyer. I wasn't a teacher. I didn't have any influence with the U.S. State Department or with people with deep pockets. The church group that I was there with didn't even need me to be their priest. Their actual priest was leading the trip, and for that matter, the group really didn't need a priest at all. I wanted to know what I was supposed to do about all this pain and injustice I was witnessing, and about all the pain and injustice it mirrored in our communities back in St. Louis. The second time I went to El Salvador on a human rights pilgrimage, 2 of my students and another friend of theirs came to me about 3 days in, deeply distressed. They were distressed not because of what they were seeing and hearing exactly. They were distressed because it felt like we were coming down as people of privilege, and they worried, asking people to lay out their worst pain for our learning and benefit. They were worried that we were there being trauma voyeurs and not really doing anyone any good. They wanted to know what they were supposed to do about all the pain and injustice they were witnessing, and about all the pain and injustice it mirrored in our communities back in St. Louis and beyond. And as my friend Mike had said to me 2 years earlier, so I said to them, we are here to bear witness. We are here to listen and observe, not because we required it of the Salvadorans who are telling us these stories, not as the cost they have to pay for our action, but because what they are asking us to do is to bear witness, to hear their stories, to assure them that those stories would be told again once we got home, to let our tears fall not as a weapon to keep our Salvadoran partners from sharing their reality, but to mingle our tears with theirs, to let them see that their pain and injustice hurts us too, and to let them hear that we too struggle with pain and injustice at home. Then we could begin to learn from one another, North Americans and Salvadorans, about what peace building at home and around the globe can look like for all of us. Then we could hear from each other about how to act. Then we could start to ask ourselves about how our privilege as well-educated U.S. citizens might give another layer of access, another layer of influence to what we could do to move the needle on justice for people of both North America and the Northern Triangle of El Salvador, Guatemala, and Nicaragua. But we had to learn to listen with patience. We had to learn that for as much as we had been asked, and rightly so, by Black and Indigenous and Latina leaders at home, not to stop with listening, to get up and do something, we also could not jump straight to acting without first witnessing what was and what was needed, without learning from the people who were already doing something about what we needed to do. We had to learn the difference between waiting idly, which never finds an end to its contentment with what is, and waiting patiently with a holy watchfulness, ready to act when the moment arrives, and watching for the moment to come. In retrospect, I can see how I and we would not have been transformed in lasting ways, would not have been able to act as helpfully if we had insisted on acting more immediately. Just as courage is not courage until it's expressed in the face of fear, patience is not patience until we have to exercise it with gritted teeth to hold ourselves back from acting. Maybe this is why, according to a midrash by Rabbi Mark Gelman, patience is what God was looking for most in choosing someone to lead the Hebrew people out of slavery in Egypt and into the Promised Land. Midrash is the Jewish tradition of stories about stories, basically. Wonderings, imaginings, questionings that break open and fill in gaps in the stories that we find and receive from the scriptures. Some of these midrash are very, very old, and some are very, very new. Rabbi Gelman is a contemporary writer, and this is his story called Watching the Burning Bush Burn, which my friend Susie shared with me this week. When God began to pick a leader for the children of Israel, God decided the most important quality God was looking for was patience. No matter how hard things got, or how stubborn Pharaoh became, or how grumbly the Hebrew people might be, or how long it took, God wanted the chosen leader to be patient with the chosen people and the chosen process. So God began to devise a way to test for patience. Now, the angels wanted to be very helpful, and so they were always coming up with ideas for how to be very helpful. And they were not always really very helpful, but since God is also patient, God listened to them anyway. One angel suggested that perhaps God could drop an enormous tangled up ball of string, and whoever unknotted it could be the leader. God did not use this test, because God knows that undoing knots is mostly tedious and boring, and being bored is not the same as being patient. Another angel brought a little cube with colored squares on each side, and to solve the puzzle, you twisted it all around until each side was all one color. The red squares, the yellow squares, the blue squares were all lined up. God sent that angel away too, explaining that puzzles do need persistence, and persistence is a good quality, but it is not quite the same as patience. Eventually, of course, God was the one who came up with the best patience test. In the desert near where shepherds would lead their flocks, God made a bush start burning. And a few shepherds noticed as they passed, but kept on going, as we might if we saw a bush by the side of the road. Bushes aren't really all that special. Sometimes bushes even caught fire, and as long as nothing was around to catch fire from them, it wasn't a big deal. And so that wasn't really all that interesting either. They didn't even notice, most people, as they walked by, that the bush wasn't being burned up, it was just on fire. But Moses, who grew up in a palace instead of as a shepherd, saw the bush and decided to sit and watch. He watched and watched, and as he watched, he noticed that even though the leaves had burnt off and the bush looked like a regular bush at first, it didn't actually burn up. The branches didn't turn to ash and fall into a heap. It just kept burning. And Moses was the only one who waited and watched long enough to notice. Moses was the only one that waited with a watchfulness. And so Moses was the one who received the mission and was empowered beyond his own capacity, the one whom God led to walk up to Pharaoh and insist that the enslaved people be set free and given resources for their journey, the one who led the people of God out into and through and back out of the wilderness. There was plenty of doing waiting for Moses to do it. The whole rest of Exodus is about, and books beyond, are beyond the doings of Moses. Had Moses just kept sitting by the bush and lollygagging after God told him what to do, who knows what might have happened. God might have moved on to a different prophet, just as the fig tree in Jesus' story is set to be cut down still if after being told go with a bucket of manure, it doesn't still produce some fruit. But Moses was a man who knew how to learn his lesson after he made a mistake. And just doing something immediately had already gone quite badly for him. The whole reason he was out in the desert tending livestock in the first place was because the first time he had tried to stand up for the Hebrew people, he had killed an overseer and had to run for his life, and kind of made the situation more worse than better. So maybe that's what taught him to sit down the second time around and watch what God was already doing before he leapt into action. I want to challenge you and also challenge me to watch for burning bushes in the next couple of months in the sense that this midrash presents it. Something that might actually not look all that extraordinary until we stop to watch it for a while, and to bear witness to what miracle is actually being worked out in it. To stop for a moment, especially in those moments when we feel compelled to fix it now, and force ourselves to stand where we are first and look around and watch. To see what is on fire without burning up, and not to throw cold water on it or run away from it. To hear what we might be told when we stop moving long enough to listen. Amen.